Hello. I would like to introduce 22 SAP Basis transactions which are very basic and frequently used. If you are engaging in SAP Basis, you should know these transactions. The first transaction is SCC4. One SAP system has several clients. You can create the clients and change its settings by this transaction. To create the new client, push New Entries button at the first screen. Then, enter the client number that differs from other client numbers. You can restrict the changes in this client by setting these options. I cancelled the client creation this time. If you want to create it, push the Save button. To change the existing client, double-click on the client that you want to change. Transaction SU01 is for creating, changing, deleting, and unlocking users in the client. To create the new user, input the username, then push the Create button at the first screen. Then, input necessary parts, like last name, initial password, roles, and profiles. Finally save it. By using other buttons in the application toolbar, you can change, display, delete, copy, unlocking the user, and also change the password. PFCG is the transaction to create, change, copy the role, and also assign the role to the user. To create the new role, input the name of role and then push the Create button. The role is having the profile, and the profile determines the actions that the user can perform in the system. In a word, the role is the authorization. In the Menu tab, you can assign, for example, the transaction that the user can execute. And the transaction selected here is listed in the initial screen of the user who is assigned this role. In Authorization tab, you can change the authorization data, and generate the profile. In this screen, you can adjust each authorization object. You can decide to assign the full authorization or restrict to the specific objects, actions, and so on. You can manually insert the specific authorization object. In the case of transaction, it is S_T code. To generate the profile, push the Generate button. The profile is generated and named like this. In User tab, you can assign the role to the specific users. Let's check whether the role is really assigned to the user in the transaction SU01. The role is assigned like this. Double-click on the role, and you will be navigated to the transaction PFCG. In the transaction SM04, you can check all users who are logging in the system, and what they are doing. You can also delete the session of specific user by pushing this button. It is also possible to take the trace of specific user by this menu. Click this button to show users in all application servers. By the way, this is the transaction AL08. Like this, you can monitor the users in the transaction SM04. Transaction ST06 is the operating system monitor. Here you can check the details about the utilization of OS. By clicking on the menu in the left pane, you can check the detail information of each item. Here, you can check the hardware information too. In this menu, you can also check the running status of services like this. As you saw now, you can check the detail information of OS and hardware, in this transaction. Transaction ST04, or DB02, is the database monitor in a word. ST04 and DB02 were used to be the different transactions. But now, it is integrated, so you are navigated to here when you type ST04 or DB02. You can check the detail information about DB, by double-clicking on the item in the left pane. Items under the Performance folder shows the information related with DB performance like expensive statements. In the folder configuration, you can check the contents of ENI file, for example. Here, you can also check the information about database files. Missing tables and indexes in the folder Diagnostics shows, for example, missing tables in DB, although those objects are defined as ABAP DDIC objects. In the menu Tables/Views, you can check the detail information of specific table like this. Here, you can check the database version. Large table shows top largest tables in the DB like this. You can also go to the page about database and data management, by double-clicking on the item in the folder Documentation. Transaction SM50 is for the monitoring of work processes in the application server you are currently logging in. As you can see now, it is possible to check what are doing in each work process. What program is running? Who are using? What table is being accessed? You can check such things here. By the way, if this CPU time part is 0 for the work process, that work process might be redundant in your application server, because it is not used at all since the system starts. If you double-click on the process, you will be navigated to the detail page of its process. Here, you can check things like how much memories are consumed for the process, DB statistics, ABAP stacks, and so on. You can also kill the process from this transaction like this. It takes a little time to kill the process, so push the refresh button until it is killed. Now, the process is terminated. You can also check the contents of trace file from here, like this. Let's check the error message in the trace file of this work process. Transaction SM51 is the work process monitor, same as SM50. But in this transaction, you can switch the application server to the one you want to monitor, like this. By the way, you can use the transaction SM66 to monitor work processes through all application servers. Transaction ST03, or ST03N, shows the workload and performance statistics. I recommend you to use this transaction in the expert mode. You can select the specific term or date to show the performance statistics. By selecting Standard from the transaction profile, you can get the detailed performance statistics like the time of response, processing, CPU, DB and so on, for the objects like program, transaction, etc. You can filter the task type like this. Then, double-click on the item, and you can check the username who executed this transaction. Under Ranking List, you can check dialog steps about top response time, and top DB accesses. You can access various other statistics by selecting the menu in the bottom left pane. User Profile shows performance statistics from the viewpoint of user, and it is possible what kind of transactions or programs were executed by the user. If you want to check the recent statistics, for example, the last 15 minutes, you can use the menu Detail Analysis and Last Minutes Load. By selecting this menu, you can change the retention period of each statistics data. Transaction SM37 is used for the monitoring and controlling of background job processing. In this list, you can check the status of background job and its processing time, etc. You can control the job by selecting these menu, for example cancel active job and so on. Double-click on the job name, and you will be navigated to the detail page of the job. In Start Condition, you can check things like the scheduled time, whether it is periodic or not, and so on. If it is periodic, you can also check its period value. Step shows the executed program or command, and if it is using the variant, you can check its contents like this. In Job Details, you can check the work process number and its process ID. Job Log shows the log message issued by the background job. Here, you can check for example the error message. You can also check the job log like this. You can change or add system profile parameters by using the transaction RZ10. At first, import the default and instance profiles from the file on OS. Select the instance profile. Then, choose Extended Maintenance and push the Change button to edit the profile parameters. Here, you can change the parameter values. If you want to change the parameter value that is not listed here, you can add it by pushing this button. Then, select the parameter name that you want to change. The default value of this parameter is shown here. Input the value, and the comment, then push the copy button. Newly added parameter is shown here. Push the copy button to save this change. Back to the initial page of this transaction, and push the Save button. Push Yes to activate the profile. Finally, it is activated and the new version of profile is created. To make the change effect, it is necessary to restart the system. If the parameter is allowed to change, you can change the value of profile parameter instantly, without restarting the system, by using the transaction RZ11. If the parameter is allowed to change, you can see Change button here. To change the value, push this button. Input the value and push the Save button. The warning is saying that this change will be lost after restarting the system. So this change is only valid until the system restart. By the way, if you choose the parameter that is not allowed to change, you cannot see the change button like this. Transaction SM59 is used to create, edit, and delete the RFC destination. In this demo, I am creating the new RFC destination that's connection type is ABAP connection. To create the destination, it is necessary to input the information of target host and its instance number at least. In the tab Logon and Security, you can input the user information that is used to log on to the system of this RFC destination. You can omit this setting. In that case, the logon screen will be appeared when the user uses this RFC destination. In the tab Unicode, you can specify the code page relevant settings. Other settings can be specified in the tab Special Options. Save the settings, and execute the connection test. Check the logon with the user information set in this RFC destination by pushing the Remote Logon button. Transaction ST22 is used to check the contents of short dump. The short dump is issued when the execution of a BAP object is aborted due to the error. The contents of short dump is like this. The detailed information about the error can be found here. Click on the ABAP code in question, then you will be navigated to the exact ABAP object. If you want to check the SAP system logs, use the transaction SM21. System logs includes the information like system errors, warnings, user locks due to failed logon attempts, and process messages in the system log. In this demo, the system log about the DB connection error is being checked. By using the transaction SNOTE, you can download and implement the note corrections. The note correction is used to update ABAP objects in order to make it better. For example, it corrects errors, performance problems, and sometimes it adds new functions. Downloading the note correction is finished now. From now on, I am implementing a note correction as a demo. This note does not require manual operations, but some note corrections require manual operation before or after, or both before and after, the implementation of note. In that case, the pop-up screen will be appeared to encourage you to execute manual operations. This transport request is used to implement this note correction in subsequent systems like the test and production systems. So it is not necessary to use the transaction SNOTE to implement note corrections in subsequent systems. This object is updated by this note correction. Implementing the note correction is finished now. You can check the status of note corrections via SAP Note browser button like this. You can also check the log like this. Transaction STMS is mainly used to set the transport relevant configurations for the systems, set the transport routes between systems, start the import of transport requests and monitor its status and logs. In System Overview, you can add the system that you want to include into your transport landscape, and set the transport relevant configurations like transport parameters and so on. In Transport Routes, you can configure transport routes between systems in your transport landscape. In Import Overview, you can import the transport request and check its contents, status, and transport logs. You can display and create the transport requests in the transaction SE01. To display the transport request, input the necessary selection criteria to find the one you want to check. At this screen, you can check the contents of transport request and the transport log. Normally the transport request is created automatically when you edit or create the object, but you can also create the transport request from this transaction. You can manually add the objects to the transport request here. To release the transport request, set the cursor on the transport request, then push the Release Directly button. You have to release the task at first. Export of the transport request is finished. Now you can check the export log. In Piece Lists tab, you can create the piece list. Piece list is the object list that is available to be included in the transport request in order to export objects listed in it. Normally it is used as a template of object list. In the tab Client, you can check the transport request that is used for the client transport. In Delivery Transport tab, you can check the contents and logs of delivery transport by SAP, for example support packages. SE16 is the transaction to display the table contents. If the table is allowed to be changed, you can also change the contents by this transaction. From the menu settings, and user parameters, you can change the default settings for the width of output list, and the maximum number of hits. If you select Fields for selection, you can select the fields that should be appeared in the selection screen. Like this. To show the table contents, input the value for selection, if necessary, and just push the Execute button. Double-click on the table entry, then you can see the table entry like this. If you select the tables that are allowed to be changed, you can create the new entry and edit the existing entries. Tables that are not allowed to be maintained, it is not possible to change like this. Transaction SE38 is used to create, edit, and delete the ABAP programs, and also execute it. Now I am executing the program named ARS PFPAR that shows the instances parameters and its values. In the transaction SA38, it is not possible to edit the programs like SE38, here it is only possible to execute the programs. So normally this transaction is assigned to the users who are not developers, but need to execute the programs, instead of SE38. Transaction AL11 is used to access OS files related with your SAP system. You can see the contents of instance profile, for example. dir_trans is the transport directory. Here, you can access to the logs of transport requests. If you double-click on dir_home, you can access to the trace files of work processes that can be also checked from the transaction SM50 and ST11. The last transaction I want to introduce you is SE93. This transaction is for creating and maintaining transactions. However, this transaction is also useful to remember the exact transaction code, when you forget it. That's all. I've introduced 22 basic basis transactions in SAP systems with brief demos and explanations. It would be necessary to understand more deeper, if you want to manipulate each transaction. However, I believe that I could show you what can be done in each transaction. If you interested in some transactions introduced in this video, please learn it more by yourself. I hope this video could be the good entrance and reference for you to learn SAP Basis transactions. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please check my other videos and subscribe this channel, if you like.